When I first went into medicine, my idea of what doctors are paid turned out to be completely different after I actually started practicing the profession. And a lot of people actually have this idea that doctors are paid this crazy exponential amount of money. But today we're going to be dispelling that. Today we're going to be talking about how much doctors are actually paid in Nigeria. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Mariam. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. We talk about all things medicine here, and if you're already subscribed, thank you. I appreciate you. Without further ado, let's start. So the salary structure for doctors is actually a bit complicated. To fully understand it, we're going to be going by ranks. I made a video about the ranking system of doctors, so you might want to watch that before you watch this so that you can fully understand what I'm talking about. So the salary of a doctor actually depends on a few factors, like their rank, whether they're in the private setting or government setting, whether they're in training or non-training, and whether they're with an independent organization like an NGO or a government parastatal. The basic of the basic ranks is the medical student, and the medical student, like we discussed before, isn't a fully fledged doctor, but they're still kind of part of the ranking system. So something interesting is that I discovered that in Nigeria, medical students are actually paid as well, which is really nice to hear. At least we're doing something right. So medical students, depending on the state, are actually paid a stipend between 30,000 naira to 50,000 naira monthly, with conditions, of course. So after the medical student comes the house officer, and this is the poor doctor that bears the jackie work of the team. So the house job is actually one mandatory year of training where a doctor rotates through 4 major departments. So that's internal medicine, surgery, pediatrics, and O1G. And usually the house officer is paid by the hospital that they work for. The salary of a house officer depends on where they're doing their house job. During my time, the salary actually ranged from as low as 80,000 naira per month to as high as 200,000 naira per month. However, because the MDCN has centralized house job and I think has taken over the payment has now kind of changed, and from what I heard, it's about between 170 and 180. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, but from my research, that was what I was able to gather. So it should be between somewhere around 150 to 180. So after the house officer comes the copper. This is where things really go south. So the copper doctor is the doctor that's finished their house job and has obtained their full license but is now doing NYSC before they can continue their medical practice. And the salary of a copper really depends. They'll naturally get the normal allowance from NYSC, but the salary they end up with as a whole largely depends on their PPA, which is their primary place of assignment. On average in Abuja, copper doctors can actually get up to 50,000 naira from their PPA, but like I said, it largely depends. It can be as low as 15k, it can be as high as 80 or even 100k depending on where you're at. So as you can see, what does not make sense here is you go from a house officer getting almost 200k to a medical officer getting barely 100,000 naira, even though you're more qualified with more experience. Make that make sense. So I'm going to ask you to comment in the comment section below what you think my PPA paid me during my 1 year of NYSC. I'll answer that question at the end of the video. After the copper doctor comes the medical officer. This is probably the most ambiguous stage. You can go from getting chicken change to getting millions in this stage. You can find medical officers in private hospitals, in government hospitals, in government parastatals, in NGOs, so they're kind of like scattered all over the place, and their salary hugely ranges depending on where they are. So a typical medical officer in a typical private hospital in Abuja gets a salary between 150k per month to 250k per month. Usually, there are exceptions. If the medical officer is in a government hospital, the medical officer is usually employed based on grades. So I think they take medical officers on grade 12 if I'm not wrong, and their salary usually ranges between 230,000 naira to 320,000 naira. I'm not sure, depending on the grade, depending on the hospital, whether it's federal or state. And then obviously the medical officers in government parastatals and NGOs make exponentially more amount of money than the rest of the medical officers. Their salaries can range from 300 to up to 1 mil per month, depending on when they are, like if you counter in basic salaries and allowances. Some of them make more than consultants. I know life isn't fair. So after the medical officer comes the registrar, and like we discussed in the previous video, there are junior registrars and then there are senior registrars. So both the junior registrar and the senior registrar are considered residents to be under specialty training. They're usually found in tertiary hospitals paid by the government through a centralized system. And something interesting I discovered during the course of my research is that in Nigeria, all specialties are paid the same. So this is in contrast to places like the US, for example, where residents in surgery and O&G are usually paid more than residents in internal medicine, because usually their work is more and they tend to spend more time in the hospital. But in Nigeria, all residents are paid the same through a centralized system, whether you're in internal medicine, surgery, O&G, pediatrics, ophthalmology, psychiatry, all of you are the same. Which, in my opinion, is actually not fair, because when you see the work that both people do, it's not the same. For example, residents in surgery and O&G, for example, tend to do more work, stay in the hospital longer than residents in, for example, psychiatry or internal medicine. So that's just some food for thought. Maybe this system can be reconsidered to give everybody a fair compensation, I guess. So the junior registrar at entry level is usually paid between 220,000 naira to 260,000 naira with yearly increments, I think. So if you contrast this to the entry level of a medical officer who is paid like between, is it 250 to 320, that's not fair. So I don't know how this system works, but during the course of my research, this was what I discovered, and it was actually very shocking. For a senior registrar in their first year, they paid something between 320 to 360, and then after the first year, I think the salary increases to around 430 to 460. And then lastly, the consultant. The consultant has no salary range because they literally can make anything, usually, but I think they're paid around 500,000 or more, depending on where they are, because consultants have a lot of freedom, unlike residents, so they can move around to private, to government, to NGOs, to parastatal. So the amount of money they can make, like the potential amount of money they can make, is actually a lot. But I think on like the lowest, they paid around 500,000 or more. So other interesting things I discovered, other than residents being paid the same regardless of specialty, is that government organizations tend to pay more than private organizations, and that people in non-clinical medicine, that is people who have done their public health or are working with NGOs, like they are not doing clinical work in the hospital, are actually paid more than doctors that are actually in the hospital doing clinical work. Yeah, so that's interesting. So as you can see, guys, the salary structure for doctors is actually not black and white. Like, it's really complicated and depends on a lot of factors. So the answer to the question I asked you guys earlier about how much my PPA paid me during my 1 year of service. Drum roll, please. My PPA paid me a whopping sum of 35,000 naira per month. Anyway, that's about all I have for you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Are you surprised by the information you've learned? If you are, please let me know in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.